Niccolò Machiavelli, known as one of the most morally bankrupt and ruthless figures in history. In the year 1539, Reginald Pole, a cardinal of the Catholic Church, labeled Machiavelli as the enemy of the human race. What could drive such a damning accusation? What dark truths did Machiavelli reveal in The Prince that provoked outrage and reshaped political thought forever? Today we'll uncover the ideas that earned Machiavelli this infamous title, exploring whether his philosophy is as sinister as his critics claim, or if it simply holds a mirror to our own nature. But before diving into Machiavelli's philosophy, let's first understand the chaotic world that shaped his infamous ideas. Niccolò Machiavelli lived during the late 15th and early 16th centuries in Florence, Italy. That time, Italy wasn't a unified nation, but a battlefield of fiercely independent city-states like Florence, Milan, and Venice, all vying for dominance. Foreign invaders from France and Spain turned this already volatile landscape into a chessboard of shifting alliances and betrayals. Amid this chaos, Florence was no stranger to political upheaval. Power shifted hands frequently, often violently. One day you could be a celebrated leader, the next, an exiled fugitive. It was in this environment of relentless power struggles and fragile allegiances that Machiavelli honed his understanding of human nature. He served as a diplomat and government official, witnessing firsthand the treachery, manipulation, and ambition of the era's most powerful figures. His masterpiece, The Prince, wasn't written for an ideal world of fairness and goodwill. Instead, it was a survival guide for rulers navigating a world drenched in betrayal and bloodshed. A world where losing power often meant losing your life. With this turbulent backdrop in mind, let's explore why Machiavelli believed that being nice is a surefire way to finish last. Reginald Pole, a devout Catholic and staunch defender of moral governance, saw The Prince as a direct assault on Christian values. Machiavelli advised rulers to prioritize practicality over morality, advocating actions many viewed as evil if they served the greater goal of securing power. In The Prince, Machiavelli famously declared, "A wise ruler ought never to keep faith when by doing so it would be against his interests." This assertion undermined the Christian ideal of moral leadership, suggesting that deceit and betrayal were acceptable tools of governance. For Pole, this wasn't just advice for rulers, it was a corruption of humanity itself, reducing politics to a game of power devoid of ethics or virtue. To understand why Pole was so critical, we must examine the core principles of Machiavelli's philosophy. 1. The necessity of evil. Machiavelli argued that rulers must sometimes commit cruel or immoral actions to maintain their power and keep the state stable. He famously said, "It is far safer to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." In simpler terms, Machiavelli believed that being feared was a more reliable way to control people than being loved. Love can fade, but fear is constant. If a ruler is feared, people will obey them, even if they don't like them. This meant that a ruler might need to use harsh methods like violence, cruelty, or deception to keep control. For Machiavelli, the survival of the state was the highest priority. Morality and ethics were secondary. 2. Human nature is selfish and fickle. Machiavelli had a very bleak view of human nature. He wrote, "In general, men are ungrateful, fickle, hypocritical, and greedy for gain." In simpler terms, Machiavelli believed that people are selfish and will act in their own self-interest. He thought that humans are unreliable, quick to change loyalties, easily manipulated, and driven by personal gain. Because of this, he advised rulers to never fully trust anyone, because betrayal is always a possibility. 3. The ends justify the means. Perhaps the most famous and controversial aspect of Machiavelli's philosophy is his assertion that the outcome of an action is more important than how it is achieved. He argued, "A prince must not worry about the reproach of cruelty when it is a matter of keeping his subjects united and loyal." In simpler terms, Machiavelli said that if the goal is to maintain power and keep the state strong, rulers should not worry about using unethical methods to achieve those goals. If being cruel or deceptive helps keep the state together, then it's justified. The result, stability and power, matters more than the morality of the actions taken. In The Prince, Machiavelli's philosophy reduced politics to a cold, calculating game, where morality took a backseat to the pursuit of power. Reginald Pole, deeply rooted in Christian values, saw this as a direct threat to the ethical and moral fabric of leadership. To him, Machiavelli was not just offering advice on how to rule effectively. He was encouraging rulers to abandon their humanity in the process. This is why Pole and many others at the time saw Machiavelli as a dangerous figure, the enemy of the human race. The question is, was Machiavelli truly evil? Machiavelli's philosophy, while grounded in political realism, undeniably carries a darker side. His guidance to rulers, prioritizing power, deception, and ruthlessness, has often been weaponized by tyrants and dictators. Leaders throughout history have used his principles to justify violating human rights, perpetuating cycles of fear and oppression to maintain control. For example, in North Korea, the present dynasty has relied on a tightly controlled propaganda machine and brutal suppression of dissent to secure its grip on power. Political prisons and public executions serve as tools of fear, exemplifying the Machiavellian idea of ruling through intimidation. Similarly, during Augusto Pinochet's regime in Chile, thousands of dissidents were tortured and disappeared, all under the pretense of securing order and stability, aligning with Machiavelli's notion that a ruler must sometimes act against morality to achieve their goals. Even in contemporary settings, authoritarian leaders manipulate elections, control media, and use state power to crush opposition. From curfews imposed during protests to outright surveillance of citizens, these tactics reveal how Machiavelli's pragmatism can morph into tyranny, where the preservation of power outweighs justice and freedom. This mentality dehumanizes society, reducing leadership to a game where the ends justify any means, no matter how brutal. It's a chilling reminder of the danger in prioritizing power without ethical boundaries, a recipe for tyranny that history has seen too often. Machiavelli's enduring influence suggests that, regardless of how controversial his ideas may be, they speak to something fundamental about human nature and the relentless dynamics of power. As he famously wrote,
"The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. Therefore, one must be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves.